Well, very rich passages today. All the readings that we heard, rich in their own way. But I hope you'd help me to think specifically about one verse and make some connections with the other passages too. So I'm thinking about that wonderful and challenging verse, 1 John chapter 3, verse 18. Little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. Well, is it just me, or does our world seem at times to have given up on words? Our culture, in its suspicion of experts, finds it easy to belittle words or speech, and to belittle those who use them most. On my walks across the city, I come across interesting graffiti art from time to time. I'm calling it art. I know some of you wouldn't, but that's what I'm calling it. Graffiti art that springs up around the city in one place or another. Recently, on the underside of one of the bridges, a colourful work suddenly appeared. It features a curious slogan: "Those who tell don't know." You might have heard it before. Those who tell don't know. Now, at its best, this slogan seems to mean that those who really have something to say do not seek publicity. They just get on with the job. They're not so interested in telling, but doing. However, the slogan, "Those who tell don't know," also seems to disparage authority figures, speakers, teachers, and preachers like me. Those who tell, it seems to say, those who tell have no idea. They do not know what they're talking about. I'm not sure whether it's lost on the artist, but she or he is also telling eloquently with image and words. Those who tell don't know. Well, this might suggest that the artist doesn't know either, because isn't the artist telling? The artist, like the author of 1 John, perhaps is a bit stuck. If you want to do anything in this world, you will have to use words at some time and in some way. The injunction in our passage, "Let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action," does not intend to denigrate words or speech as such. At least I don't think so. For its very message is conveyed by words. Furthermore, it can be a wonderful act to speak a fitting word at the right moment. Haven't you experienced it when someone said just the right thing to you? They weren't just words, this was an act of kindness. It's surely not that speaking is bad and acting is good, as if speaking were not itself a form of acting. 1 John chapter 3 verse 18 exposes the problem of mere speech, of the offering of words as a cheap substitute for costly service. It condemns insincere speech and empty talk. As the Epistle of James puts it, if a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill," and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? Or the earlier verse in 1 John that we read together that makes a similar point. How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses help? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm often aware of a sense of helplessness in the face of events, problems, or circumstances that people face. What can we do about the coronavirus catastrophe unfolding right now in India, for example? What can you do for a friend who is grieving the loss of a loved one? Or for someone who's received a devastating diagnosis? What can you do? Well, in such circumstances, I usually offer my thoughts and prayers. But I know that the gesture can seem hollow. Telemachus Ophanes was a young man of 27 when he was killed in 2018 in a mass shooting in the United States of America. In a TV interview, his mother, Susan, said, "I hope to God nobody sends me any more prayers. I don't want prayers. I don't want thoughts. I want gun control." I get that, don't you? The hashtag "no more thoughts and prayers" now trends on Twitter with each new mass shooting in the United States. I think we all get what's going on. When evangelicals in the United States of America offer thoughts and prayers, but oppose stricter gun control, their thoughts and prayers may seem insulting to the victims of gun violence. Now, the three-word phrase, "I am sorry," along with its counterpart, "I forgive you." Well, these phrases, I think, are some of the most powerful in the English language. I am sorry, perhaps the most powerful, along with its counterpart, I forgive you. These are good phrases to learn, to know, and to use. Notice the power in I forgive you. And notice the way in which we're tempted when someone says, "I'm sorry," just to say, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry about it." But I forgive you might really set someone free. However, there are times when the words alone are not enough. Especially this might be so with apologies. We need to know that the speakers mean the words. And we learn the truth or otherwise of their words by their continuing behaviour. So when the Commonwealth War Graves Commission finally admits that up to 54,000 Indian and African war casualties were treated with unequal dignity in death, something more than an apology is necessary. Or when the Post Office prosecutes the greatest miscarriage of justice in UK history against its own staff, something more than an apology will be required. It's only right. Still, I believe that prayer can make a difference for people who are going through difficult circumstances, and we ought not to give up on it. And I believe it's important that we think of others when they're in need, even if we feel we can do little about it. Turning to God in prayer in time of need has always been and continues to be important. And we who believe in God and in the shepherding love of Jesus Christ cannot in any way abandon prayer and good thoughts for people in need. I believe it's important that we think about other people. The Queen stated, was it just last week, that the many expressions of sympathy at the death of her husband, Prince Philip, have been a comfort to her. In my own experience, words or cards that I received at just the right moment have sometimes had a powerful effect on my life. Today we've heard some of the great words of Jesus, just words. I am the Good Shepherd. I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. I lay down my life for the sheep. We know these words are true because of what Jesus did. As his sheep, we have come to know the voice of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, because we have learned to associate his voice with care, security, help, and sustenance. He feeds us spiritually, even though too often we ignore his offer. Indeed, the gospel picture is one of Jesus gathering one flock. The purpose is often forgotten in these verses, but gathering one flock, then feeding and protecting that one flock. When we face difficulty and danger, our instinct is to scatter and run. But Jesus calls us to himself and to each other. The shepherd gathers us to himself and faces up the lion or the wolf, as it is in our reading, protecting us against the foe. Jesus did this ultimately, of course, when he laid down his life on the cross on our behalf. Jesus, who paid this great price, inspired the writer of 1 John, just as he inspires us to live in the love of God. Little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action. The risen Jesus calls us to live in the world as those who really believe that Jesus, the Good Shepherd, who laid down his life to save us, is the way to God. This is a call to costly, sacrificial living, but it's also a call to abundant living, to resurrection life. For the one who laid down his life took it up again. So perhaps today, as we think about friends and others in need, we might be led to speak a word, send a card, make a phone call. As we see the reality of ecological emergency or institutional racism, perhaps we'll be led to write a letter or sign a petition. Perhaps today we can offer our services, send a donation, or perform a simple act of kindness. The important thing is that we as Easter people allow the resurrection life of God and the love of God to flow through us to the world that God is still gathering to himself. Little children, let us love in truth and action. So help us God. Amen.